Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Profit Minds podcast. My name is Dr. Stephen Kirch, and I'm the creator of the Profit Minds Growth System, a unique blend of profit growth, productivity acceleration, and business process for scale. In every episode, I interview entrepreneurs and small business owners from around the world with a unique story to tell. You can find the show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple and Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and more. Today, my guest is Anastasia Lipske of Access Speakers, and we're going to talk about how to use podcast guesting to grow your business and to do it in the best way. Welcome, Anastasia.
Thank you. Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So, podcast guesting, obviously, you're a guest. I've had
Right.
guests on my program, so talk to us. I'd love to hear the story of how you came to podcast guesting as a way to grow your business.
Okay. Well, first off, I have been a speaker agent for 13 years. I can't remember. I actually just had an anniversary. I know because everybody congratulated me on LinkedIn. So I've been at it for a while. And what I did was, and still do, a very unique business model where I work with people who are using speaking as a marketing tool to grow their business, not to pitch themselves, but to instead enlighten, if you will, educate and inspire audiences. And then when you do that, if you speak well, you speak with integrity to bless your audience, there's going to be a certain percentage of people that are going to resonate with what you're sharing, and they're going to want to work with you. So I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, small business owners, people who are using this marketing tool to, in essence, get out there and gain visibility, influence. They build influence through that and then get clients as a result of it, authors, coaches, etc. So I was doing really well with that for quite some time because there really isn't anybody else out there that's doing it. The people that I work with are those that are speaking for free to grow their business. They're what we refer to as platform marketing speakers. So, or speak to sell speakers. There's a lot of different terms for them. So I'm going about my merry old way for quite some time doing that. And then March of 2020 happened.
What happened in
And
March of 2020?
gee, I don't
Remember.
know, but I seem to recall something about masks and don't go anywhere. And
Indeed.
especially if you recall in the beginning when the entire, well, I always think of our country, but the world shut down. We literally quarantined, right?
Yeah.
In the beginning, we didn't want to go out for fear, like this is, World War whatever. I don't know. Just like it's coming down, and that's when we were getting our groceries, and then we set them outside in the sun for 3 days, and then bring them in and still wipe them down with the wipes. Because all this is going on. And, what's one of the first things that happens? Every single meeting was canceled.
Yeah, so your speaking gigs were all live in person, kind of,
Yes.
Go to the local Rotary, go
Yes.
to, the Chamber of Commerce or some other, realtor groups or things like, I would guess that kind of thing, right? Where everybody was meeting in person and
Exactly.
from Friday to Monday, it stopped.
Even some on Saturdays, because there are some groups that I work
Well,
with
I
that
understand,
meet on Saturdays. Yeah.
Friday was fine, right? In
Yeah.
fact, my wife and I bought a car on Friday, and when we went to the dealer on Monday to pick it up, the dealer was trying to figure out how they were, because the very next that day at midnight, everything was shut down here in California.
Wow.
So we had enough notice
It
that
was
we could go
pretty
pick up the car, but it's crazy.
It was, this, who knew? Who knew? This was just so unique.
It's a once in a century kind of event, right?
I hope.
Well,
but the cool thing is that now, if it's not, we're better prepared. So there's this understanding of how to work through things, right? Somewhat.
Yeah.
So what we learned is that we can go virtual. I mean, I was blown away by some of the things that went virtual, but in the beginning, everything was gone. So my clients pay me to book them to speak for free because they know that it's their best marketing tool. And for some people that this now all of a sudden they're grounded. So their best marketing tool is no longer available to them. And until the world started going to virtual meetings instead, because in the beginning we're just all in shock, what do we do? Those people had nothing to do. So even though I had clients who had in the past asked me if I would book them on podcasts, I said no, because I just didn't have the bandwidth to take that on. It's a very different thing than booking speaking engagements. So I decided to embrace the pivot word of 2020 since I lost my business overnight because everything I did was canceled. And I can't keep my clients' money if what I booked for them didn't happen, even though it wasn't my fault. So I thought, you know what? Now's the time to try that podcast guesting thing. So I decided to dip my toes in it and see how it might fly. And what I found was that for many people, but in particular in the speaking industry, the speakers who also decided to embrace podcast guesting instead of sitting at home. And I don't want to, degrade anyone by making the joke about, eating bonbons and just waiting for the pandemic to be over. But the reality is those that said, you know what, I'm going to change my tactics. I'm going to get out there. I'm going to start podcast guesting. They're doing so much better now because podcast guesting has a digital footprint. Far more than speaking ever will.
Right.
There's just a lot, these breadcrumbs, if you will, and they're evergreen. And that's one of the things I love about podcast guesting. So if you remember, we were shut down. Then we started to come back and people started to meet in person. And then we had the Delta.
We were shut down.
And then everybody shut down again. Then we start to finally come back and people are a little bit more leery, but they're starting to come back. And then we have the Omicron shut down. And so this back and forth, like getting whiplash in a car was what was happening in the speaking industry, at least in the in-person speaking.
Right.
So podcast guesting always was virtual and always will be virtual. So no matter what is going on, as long as a person has their microphone, a headset, in access to the internet, like you are golden.
Camera.
Yes, camera.
That too.
Which, by the way, I don't know if you know this, but more than 70% of podcasts are now shared visually. They didn't used to be. People would use StreamYard, Zoom, etc. They would use these platforms and do a visual interview, then extrapolate the sound out of it. Just the audio would go and be published, right? But then people started realizing, but we've got this raw content here that's visual. What about all the visual people? And let's take advantage of the fact that YouTube is one of the #1 search engines on this planet. Why not utilize it? So you'll find a lot of the podcasts now are also being shared visually on YouTube. So people don't realize that, but it's important that we take advantage of the evergreen factor, the digital factor, and utilize that. Now, the thing is, you can get on podcasts and you can be interviewed. It's a brilliant marketing strategy, but if you don't use the strategy aspect of it, if you're not really following best practices on how to promote it and how to get the most out of every interview that you're on, you're really losing incredible opportunities. And those people that were out there and they were visible and they were sharing every episode that they were on, etc., not only are they being found more and being invited to more podcasts, but they're also being invited as speakers more because their name pops up more often. In particular, if you're a subject matter expert, the more often your name and that subject are put in the same sentence, the higher you're going to come up in the rankings. And there's also that law of familiarity that whenever someone sees or hears your name, you build influence just through that. Yeah. So it's a powerful, powerful tool.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about that. So that makes perfect sense, right? And by the way, if you're doing this virtually, you have the ability to reach an audience that you can't in person.
That's correct.
right? If you do it out on the digital, on YouTube, right? Anybody can look for a YouTube. You don't have to be somebody that's geographically close.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what a gift that turned out to be.
I know. Talk about silver lining. I mean, it
Right.
was looking really bleak. I'll be honest. March, that was a bad month.
I'm sure it was a bad month for a lot of
It
us.
was
I mean,
for
and
a
not
lot of
just
us.
because of all of the people who were dying.
Right. Right. Yeah. The business, and it's interesting because my former life was in tourism. Tourism got nailed in the pandemic as well. So yeah, there are some industries that did really well, and there are some other industries that were just absolutely slammed. The only other free speaker agency that I knew of in our country, she did shut down because of COVID. So she shut down in April of 2020, and moved on to something different. And I just didn't want to do that because I love this. I believe in the power of the voice. I believe that if people have a message and they don't share it, they're doing the world a disservice. So whether it's something that's a personal nature, like I've got one of my clients, actually, she doesn't have a business around her speaking, but she's an advocate. She's an advocate for helping others to be advocates, to be the Davids fighting Goliaths, because that's what she did. She took on the Army Corps of Engineers and got them to fess up to the fact that they cut corners and made mistakes during Hurricane Katrina and cost more than 1,400 people their lives. And that story of what she did, this woman who, for all intents and purposes, was a housewife living in New Orleans and had no engineering background or anything like that, but she was a mama bear that got mad because of what happened in her community, right? Watch out for the mama bears. And like an Erin Brockovich, I mean, she just took them on. And now she has her own podcast called Beat the Big Guys. Her name is Sandy Rosenthal. She's just incredible, but she shares and helps other people who are fighting the battles, that are trying to affect change in the world. And it starts like that Margaret Mead quote about, I don't even know what it says, but basically it's something along the lines of, don't ever think that nothing can be accomplished by just a handful of people, because in reality, that's the only time any change has ever really happened. So you start with one person, that one person influences a handful, that handful influences potentially a nation or a world. Well, not only in these types of things that are say more on a personal level, or activist level, if you will, but there's also, for me, the business level, because I believe that this marketing tool makes a difference. So all of my clients, I believe in their message, whether they're helping people improve their memory, or they're helping people like Miley. You interviewed Miley Colmer. Okay.
Yes.
So she's helping people learn how to be referral experts, how to connect with potential referral partners to grow their business. I love that, because she's helping other people grow their business. I help Miley get out there to talk to more people, so that more people learn from her on how they can grow their business. And it's just this exponential growth. It's like a big one, love fest, if you will. So
that's terrific.
Yeah. And I get to choose who my clients are, right?
Yeah,
so this is part of my ministry in life, if you will.
That's great. So what are the keys to being effective in let's say using podcasts for growing your business? What are the key steps?
Key steps. First, more than anything, you have to have real clarity on who it is that you really want to get in front of. Okay. You don't just go and be interviewed on every single podcast that's out there, because remember, it's evergreen.
Right.
So if you are on a podcast that is not really a great fit, that's going to be obvious. Either you're going to be so mismatched in that lineup of other guests that it seems out of sorts, or you will find that you don't have a flowing dialogue, if you will, with that host. Right. And people can feel that. So I always recommend, okay, so first off, you get clarity on who you want to be in front of. When you find a show that you feel that you're a really good fit for, before you even go further with that, be sure to listen. Listen
Hmm.
to at least one episode. And one of the things that I say you should always consider at the very end of it, after you've heard that episode, ask yourself, would I want to sit at a cafe and have a cup with that host? Because if the answer is no, don't do it. Because then your dialogue, it's not going to be conversation. It's going to be this strained interview format. And the listeners are not going to jive with either one of you. So make certain that you actually connect with that person. We never know why. Sometimes you know how you can
Yeah.
hear a person and you have no idea why you don't like them. It's the sound of their voice. They remind you of your first grade teacher and they were really mean. Like, I don't know what it is, but we have this energetic connection or disconnect with people.
And
Pay
it doesn't
attention.
necessarily have to do with like or dislike. It
No.
is a matter of personal resonance, and I absolutely get
Yeah,
that, right?
exactly. Exactly. So when you find that host that you resonate with, then that's when you approach them. And when you approach them, you make sure that they know why you feel you're a really great fit for their show. First off, make sure their show is still happening. Okay. Because podcast fade is a big thing. There's over 3 million podcasts out there, and they are not all active. So a lot of people will jump in and decide that they want to have a podcast, and they don't necessarily keep it going. So you want to always make certain that the episodes are recent. You want to
Hmm.
make certain that they have guests. I can't tell you how many times people reach out to a podcast to invite themselves as a guest, and it's a solo show. So, you're
Wow.
like, well,
Yeah.
obviously they didn't listen. Okay, so there's that.
Yeah.
But when you are approaching that host, keep in mind that any podcast host, at the end of the day, what they want is someone they can have an intriguing conversation with. But more importantly, that guest is somehow, some way going to help them grow their listenership, their subscribers, their downloads, their visibility, all of that. Every podcast host wants to grow their show. So if you are approaching a host and you want them to consider you, keep in mind what's in it for them. How can I be a blessing to that host and their listeners? Make sure that you're conveying that to that host, because a lot of people have jumped on the podcast guesting bandwagon. So hosts now have a plethora of people to choose from, especially the more a host has been out there and promoting their show, the bigger the show is, then the less or the more people are approaching them, but the less they have to just take anybody that comes, right?
Right.
You could be more prudent, if you will, as far as
More
who you're going to
selective.
bring on.
More selective,
Absolutely.
right? It's not a
Absolutely.
matter of prudence. It's a matter of and you want to make sure that as a host, right? I want to make sure that I'm going to have a good time, that I'm going to,
Yeah,
that my audience is going to appreciate it, right? They're
exactly.
absolutely spot on, right?
You have an obligation to your listeners. If you ever do like a bait and switch and all of a sudden you're bringing somebody else in and it really doesn't fit in at all with what you've been building, then you're not going to be serving your clients or your potential
Listeners,
clients, right?
listeners.
And your listeners. So it's important that all of this be done in a way that, to me, I'm always about individuality and I'm about blessing the other person. So how can you as a guest bless that host? How can you ultimately bless their audience? And are you really a good fit? And if so, then let that host know why. And the more specific you can be, the better. So if you do listen to an episode, and I sure hope you do, when you're conveying to that host why you're a great fit, reference an episode that you listened to. Say, hey, and I really resonated with Sally Jones on episode 239 when she talked about XYZ, because I also talk about that, but from a different viewpoint that I think would help supplement what your listeners have already learned, or something along those lines. Because that tells that host that you took the time to listen to their show to begin with, and B, they're understanding there's a connection in there and it really is a good fit. So that's going to help them be more likely to support you. You also want to make sure that you promote it, that you share it. A person can share it before, during, and after. Hey, I just got booked to be on this podcast. Can't wait for it to come out. Meanwhile, check out this show. Do the host a solid, rate, review it, listen, subscribe, blah, blah, blah. Tag that host so they know that you're promoting them. Then, oh, by the way, hey, Stephen, can I take a screenshot of us really quick?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so just smile really quick. Okay, so this is what I do. Because this is not live, no one can hear this episode today. But I will today or tomorrow at latest, I will take this screenshot and I will share it on LinkedIn because that's kind of where I hang.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do the other social medias. And I'm going to tell people, hey, just did this fantastic, interview with Dr. Stephen Kirch. I am so excited about it. I'll let you know when it comes out. Meanwhile, check out his show. Like, I will demonstrate this so you will see it. And any of your listeners who are following you on LinkedIn, they can see it as well. But I highly recommend that everybody do it the day of, so you start building excitement towards it. And also always be asking for other opportunities to be a guest on a show. Do you know of, so I can share this episode with you and I, and then I usually will say, do you know of any other episodes or shows that I would be a good fit for? I would appreciate any leads, any introductions, etc., so that people are continually thinking of other shows that they can invite you to or tell people about. So that's another way for you as an individual to get invited to and connected with more hosts. And then when it airs and you get me that link, then I will actually share the episode. And I also will watch for you, assuming that when you share it, you tag me, then I will then take that and I will share it. So that way I'm getting you more visibility. It's just like this total love fest on LinkedIn. And you just keep tagging each other, commenting, liking. My people get exposure to you. Your people get exposure to me. We both get to grow our networks because of it. So it's a win-win.
Great. Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. So how do you go about finding groups or podcasts to get in front of?
Oh, there's a lot of ways. First, you start with your clients. Okay, as far as where you want to be a guest. You go to your clients and you ask them what podcasts they listen to. Now, you're going to get the gardening podcasts and the UFOs or on falconry or whatever it might be, okay?
Yeah.
But you will also find that there may be some shows that are more, say, business related or might be tied into where you might be a good fit. So you start with your people and get a sense from them as to where they are listening to podcasts. You also go out to your network. You start with your sphere of influence. You reach out. You go on LinkedIn and you just tell all your connections, hey, I am looking to get booked on podcasts. What podcasts do you know about that you think I might be a great fit for? If you can do an introduction, fantastic. If you're not able to do an introduction, but it can at least tell me about it, that would be greatly appreciated as well. So you start there. But you also you could do searches, okay? You can do keyword searches. I like to use Listen Notes. ListenNotes.com is a really great resource. There's a few search engines that are out there specifically geared towards podcasts. I happen to really like their format and style. I can go there. I also, when you know of someone that is out there and they are doing podcast guesting and you are in alignment with them, either you have a similar message or you know that their avatar, their end listeners, their clients are yours as well. If you find people that are out there that are doing podcast guesting, you can look to see what podcasts they have been on and use that as a hit list. So, and I do that in my agency all the time. I will find shows based on where other people they know and like and they respect where they've been. And you could go down this rabbit hole forever because once you discover that person,
podcast.
absolutely. Absolutely. So you got to pull yourself back every once in a
Hmm.
while,
Hmm.
okay, and center, and then go back at it. But use other people as a hit list. And so many people, and wisely so, are adding the podcasts that they've been on their own website. So
Sure.
if you really want to get booked as a podcast guest, at bare bones minimum, you want to have a one sheet. And that is basically a media sheet that promotes you as a podcast guest. It's very much like in the speaking world, a traditional speaker one sheet where it's promoting you as a speaker, and people would use those to kind of summarize what you speak on, where you've spoken, testimonials, all that. Same thing with podcast guesting. You could take that same format and put it towards podcast guests and or a podcast that you've been on. Now, people are now using also on their own website, they'll put a page, a special tab, just where I've spoken, where I've been, appearing as a podcast guest. So again, if you find that person that you're kind of in alignment with them, or you know that they're talking to the same kind of people you want to get in front of, go to their website and see if they've listed the shows that they've been on. On my website, every one of my clients, the profile that we've got lined up, we mention the names of a lot of speaking engagements that they've had. So that's a good hit list for groups that you can get in front of. Because obviously, if they spoke there, then these organizations are looking for speakers. Same thing with the podcast. Obviously, if these people were interviewed, then that means they take guests. At least they did at one point. And you could also, like in my case, we link to the podcast episode for each and every one of them. So you can literally go in and listen to some of these episodes to see, again, if you resonate with that host. And if you do, then you can kind of check it out a little bit further, do your due diligence. In the consulting that I do, this is a huge part of my business, is I consult with people and I help them to really understand how to vet the perfect podcast that they could approach on, to get themselves booked.
Mm.
And a lot of the best practices, how to share, how to get the attention of a host, because it's so much more than just sending them an email or filling out a
Right.
form.
Right.
So,
Great.
yeah. So there's just some ideas. I could
So,
talk for 8 hours on
yeah,
that.
I know. So who's the perfect client for you, Anastasia?
Perfect client for me would be anyone who is interested in using their voice, ideally to grow their business. So they want to be booked on podcasts. They want to get booked to speak. And we are not always a great fit to represent everyone that's out there. It really just depends on what they're looking for, the types of groups that we work with, the types of podcasts we work with, etc. But my consulting, I can help anyone. So I work with podcast hosts. I help them to get better visibility because I'm an agent. So
Right.
I have a unique position of being a person who knows what it's like to vet a podcast to make certain that it is the type of podcast I'm okay with my clients paying me to get booked on. So I'm very you know, discerning, if you will, when I'm looking at podcasts. So I can help a podcast host know some of the things that they can do to help them be seen as the type of show that a guest wants to be on. I can help them grow their show, in essence. That's part of what I do. I work with people who want to be a guest on podcasts, how they're showing up. What does their one sheet look like? What does their LinkedIn profile look like? What does their email signature look like? How are they approaching those hosts? How are they getting their attention? What are some of the best practices that they are or are not doing that can increase their chances of getting booked? And more importantly, getting the most out of every one that they do. So there's all these different variations on what a person can do to get booked and how to make it be effective. So people who want to grow their business by using their voice is really who I'm looking for.
Okay. And if somebody wants to reach out to you, somebody wants to get engaged with you and talk with you further, what's the best way to reach out?
The best way is connecting with me on LinkedIn. I will also direct people, though, to a dedicated page that has all of my contact information, my LinkedIn profile connection, and if they're interested in a free ebook, they can get that there. I'm happy to do, phone conversations with people, Zooms, etc., to connect and meet them. I love talking with people. So they can just go to it's my web address /thank you. So it's accessspeakers.biz, biz/thank you. And I recommend to anyone that is doing podcast guesting that they have a page that's similar where people can be directed to that page instead of them saying, well, they can find me on LinkedIn and they can find me on Facebook and here's my Insta handle and here's my Twitter handle, and they go on and on and on and on. If you just have one place that you direct everyone, it's golden. It makes it easier because, especially with podcasting, people that are listening to us at this very moment, they might have their hands in dirty dishwater. Maybe they're driving their car. It's not going to be easy for them to remember all the places that they can find me. But if they can just remember that my business name is Access Speakers and it's .biz with a /thank you, then we're connected.
That's terrific.
Thank you.
And that concludes our show. Thanks to our guest, Anastasia Lipske of Access Speakers. I hope you've learned something about podcast guesting and hosting. I know I did. This is Dr. Stephen Kirch of Profit Minds. Make sure you catch us again next time on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and more. And of course, I'd appreciate a good review on any of those platforms. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.